Welcome back to the program. My next guest in the studio is Jack Miller, and he's the leader of the Cape Party. Jack, welcome to the studio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Errol.
So, in these series of programs, we introducing the various political parties to our viewers, hopefully to give them a lot more information so they can make an informed decision on the 8th of May at the elections. Now, the Cape Party, just judging by your name, you are contesting the election in the Western Cape province only.
At the moment, yes. We are a grassroots organization. We're grassroots funded by our supporters, activists and members, and we will be contesting in the Western Cape. If we do get more support, financial support, it's 200,000 Rand to contest on the national ballot. We would rather use funding like that for better uses here in the Western Cape. But with greater funding, we may also contest the national ballot.
So in future elections, we might see the Cape Party. We probably have to change your name. Cape Party, if you're contesting on a national level.
We wouldn't change our name. Our values are entrenched here in the Cape. We consist of people that are born and raised in the Cape, have the Cape's interest at heart, and we can go into our policies a little bit later.
Okay. So how long has the Cape Party been going?
The Cape Party has been around since 2007, and we have a long-term vision that I think people didn't quite realize the value of in the earlier years. There was a hope that, certainly here in the Western Cape, that the DA would be able to bring about a type of a rainbow nation that we were promised in 1994. It is very clear today that we do not have a rainbow nation, quite the opposite. And the DA, instead of holding the ANC accountable, we now see them changing their policies, becoming more and more like ANC light to try and get the ANC electorate. And their policies are reflecting the same sort of socialist, communist policies of the ANC.
Okay.
So as a result of that, we at the Cape Party from 2007, now in the last 2 years, have seen a far greater surge in support of what the Cape Party stands for. And we've seen our polling go from about between 10 and 20% in the last 2 years, which is a very hopeful sign.
Okay. So before we go into the crux of your policies and your vision for the Western Cape, we want to find out more about Jack Miller as the leader of the party. Give us a little bit of your background.
I've been living in the Cape my whole life. The Cape is my home. I'm proudly Capetonian. For some time I was in schooling out in the Eastern Cape, in Grahamstown. I graduated with a triple major from UCT in the arts. I grew up in a family that was always very politically minded. My father was involved with a number of political figures in 1993, 1994, such as Dr. Mario Ambrosini, who was the right-hand man in the IFP under Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And at that time, there was a great distinction as to what direction the country would take. You had the apartheid government, the NP, negotiating with the ANC for a centralized political system, and you had parties like the IFP and PFP and groups like that, which my father had been involved in, Committee for the Cape Republic at that point, that was pushing for a more decentralized federal type system. Unfortunately, the ANC government managed to take power and control, which was a handing over from one centralized dictatorial government to another centralized dictatorial government. It was simply a changing of shade, of skin color, which defined their policies we have now seen. And so the Cape Party came about as a result of the last 25 years, this constant degradation towards where we're heading. In 2007, the Cape Party was founded, and I did this based upon the understanding that I had learned through my youth with my family and in discussions with these political figureheads. And so this led me to starting the Cape Party in 2007.
Okay, and so you have a leadership team around you. You've got people all over the Western Cape. Do they share your passion and your values for the Western Cape as you do?
Absolutely. Everyone within the Cape Party has joined us and fights for our values because of a deep love and a care for the Cape. And so whether it be Alderman Corin Brainard, who was a councillor for 11 years with the DA, who decided to leave the DA because she could not look at her constituency in the eye because she was so, her wings had been clipped, she was unable to address the needs of her community because the DA had become so centralized. And so people like Corin Brainard, people like Adrian Kay, people like Advocate Carlo Fillion, people like Ibrahim Davids, these are all people who have a deep sense of love for their communities and the Cape, and this is something that is consistent throughout the executive and membership of the Cape Party.
Okay, so maybe you could then go into explaining the vision and the policies of the Cape Party. How do you envisage addressing the challenges that we're facing here?
Yes, first and foremost, we would like to negotiate with the ANC government and say, listen, your centralized, communist-leaning political policies are destroying this country. Worse than that, your race-based policies are destroying us here in the Cape. The Western Cape has got a population of about 70% who belong to an ethnic group or a language group that is discriminated against by Black Economic Empowerment, by the Employment Equity Act, by quota systems, and this constant attack on our way of life. So we would want to negotiate with the ANC and say, listen, you need to change your policies of affirmative action and quota systems. You need to change the policies of the Division of Revenue Act, which takes 200 billion rand out of the Cape and returns to us a mere 50 billion rand. If you do not change these policies, then you give us no other option but to call a referendum. And if the people of the Western Cape vote in favor for greater autonomy in this referendum, we will then declare the Western Cape an independent country. As an independent country, for example, with the Division of Revenue Act, which takes 200 billion rand out of our coffers, and we get back only 50 in direct access, we would overnight become 4 times wealthier than we currently are. We would be able to fix all of the issues that we've dealt with up until this point, the water crisis, housing issues, schooling, infrastructure, etc. We would be able to fix all of those issues overnight with Cape independence.
Okay, so if the people supported this independence of the Western Cape, for example, would it require an amendment to the Constitution to bring this into effect, or do you have to go to the Constitutional Court?
From a legal point of view, there are a number of different avenues that it could take. For example, Section 235 of the South African Constitution grants communities the right to self-determination. South Africa also happens to be a signatory of the United Nations, a signatory of the African Union, and within these charters, there are reams and reams of legal criteria which protect and guarantee the right to self-determination of communities. So all we would need would be 50% plus 1 within the Western Cape for us to begin the legal process of calling on Section 235 in the South African Constitution, calling upon the charters in the African Union, which South Africa is a signatory to, and calling on the charters in the United Nations international law, to which we are signatories to.
Okay. As you travel around the Western Cape, speaking to ordinary people, are you finding a lot of support for this?
We are. We really are. Not so much when we were founded in 2007, but we have found that in the last 2 years in particular, I think with land expropriation without compensation, I think that with the DA now really exposing themselves as an ANC light with their policies and the direction that they're moving in, with the degradation of society that we're seeing all around us, people are waking up to the fact that we need to start governing ourselves because the government is failing. Be it the ANC on a national level, be it the DA on a provincial level, the government is failing. And the Cape Party vision is to devolve power down to local communities. We as community members should be able to vote in referendums on policies that affect us on a day-to-day basis.
That's right. Now, previous guests on these shows have also indicated that national government does not allow too much power to come into the provinces. So, for example, safety and security is a major issue here in the Western Cape, but the MSC for safety and security in our provincial government doesn't have much power to, for example, where to put police stations as far as policing is concerned and all those kind of things. He has to depend on the National Police Commissioner and the National Minister of Police. They make the decisions for the Western Cape. That doesn't necessarily help us in what we're doing. How do you change all of that? Again, does it need a constitutional amendment? How do we get the power back so that when it comes to education, vital issues like education, safety and security, health, that the province has more powers to address those issues?
It doesn't require a constitutional change. What it would require is political will. And we have gone knocking. We've had personal meetings with the DA. We've taken this issue up at public meetings with the DA, and they have refused to challenge the national government on these issues. We have asked them, why do you not challenge the ANC on the Division of Revenue Act, which takes so much money, 75% of our revenue, out of our control? How can you allow such policies like that, and such policies which discriminate and give housing to people that are leapfrogging our local citizens who've been on the housing list for up to 40 years? How can you support these types of policies? The DA has responded by saying, we believe we will win a national election against the ANC. And frankly, that is pure insanity. And it's not just the DA. The Cape Party was formed because of a disillusionment with the entire political system. And so whether it be the claims of the Democratic Alliance or the ACDP or the Freedom Front, who have made attempts to try and, or claims to try and fix the political system, here we are, 25 years in, and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we at the Cape Party were formed to change that political system. And we can make changes. We would certainly hit the ANC and say, we want a better division of revenue, and we want you to stop persecuting our people, the majority of our people here in the Cape, on language or skin color. That is something that the DA can do and that they haven't done. We do need greater provincial control over our policing, over our schooling, over various capacities that fall within the gambit of the national government, and the DA is not doing it. We at the Cape Party would do that first and foremost, and as I mentioned earlier, if the ANC would not make those concessions, we would then be forced. We would have no other option but to go for complete independence, so then we can control our taxes, we can look after our people.
Okay, so we want to talk about that. How do we go, your idea, and others have been talking about it, that Western Cape that should be governed independently from the rest of the nation. And we want to also examine if there's a lot of support for that or growing support for that. So don't go away, more with Jack Miller after the break. Welcome back to the program. I'm speaking to Jack Miller, the leader of the Cape Party. And the Cape Party is contesting the elections in the Western Cape province only, but later have ambitions to go national. Am I correct, Jack?
Yes, not with the intention of taking over the national structures of government. We have no intention to do that, and we wouldn't be able to achieve it anyway because of the political leanings of those majority ANC areas. What we would want to do is use the political system, the peaceful, democratic political system, use those levers of power to influence the national government. We're called the Cape Party. We will never change our name from the Cape Party because our interests, we are made up of people who are from the Cape, whose best interests rest in the Cape, and whose intentions are to uplift the lives of the people of the Cape.
Okay, got it. So you say there is a growing support, growing movement for the Western Cape to govern itself independently from the rest of South Africa. And people are saying that because mainly, are you saying it's discrimination? Because as we know, the Western Cape is made up of majority so-called Cape coloured people. And our national government is applying national demographics. So, for example, here you 80% black, 8% coloured, 5% white, 1% Indian, and so that is applied in the Cape. So coloured people, although they're a majority, are losing out on jobs and other kind of benefits. So we need to change that. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, Jimmy Money a few years back said that coloureds in the Cape need to stop complaining and need to get on a bus and go to other provinces where they would be more demographically representative of the national demographics of South Africa. South Africa is an artificial state. It was forced upon us by the British Empire in 1910. From 1910 to 1948, we were controlled through British Empire influence. From 1948 to 1994, we were controlled by centralized Nat government influence, which was predominantly in the Vaal region. From 94 until now, we've been controlled by the ANC regime, which too has a centralized racial agenda. And so we at the Cape Party believe that enough is enough. We now can finally put an end to this discriminatory political system. We were promised a rainbow nation in 1994. That's not what has happened. We've got the complete opposite. And we believe we can have a rainbow nation right here in an independent Western Cape.
Okay. So the Cape Party has been around since 2007. You're a small party with ambitions to grow, obviously. So how do you get into the provincial government? So do you have ambitions to become the provincial government of the Western Cape, or do you want to be part of the government so you can bring your influence?
Yes, we have a long-term vision, a long-term plan, and there's different ways that we could achieve it. Obviously, if we were to have a majority, we would be able to bring in our policies and our value system. But if even with a mere 15%, we would be able to push the DA under 50%. This is the primary goal, and the DA spreads this lie where they say that if you do not vote for the DA, the ANC will get in. This is numerically impossible. It cannot happen. The only way that can happen is if a DA voter wakes up one morning and all of a sudden decides he is going to become an ANC voter. The Western Cape has voted approximately between 60 to 70% against the ANC's policy. I'm just here in Cape Town 2 years ago. The DA got 67%, the ANC got 24%, the EFF got 3%. So the ANC and EFF in a coalition combined had 27%. There is zero capacity, there's zero political capacity for the ANC or these African nationalist, racially African nationalist agenda parties to get into the Cape. With the vast majority of the population of the Western Cape votes against these types of principles, traditionally that vote has gone to the DA. We're saying the DA has grown out of touch with its voter. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. For 10 years, the DA has governed without any competition, and other parties like the ACDP and Freedom Front, who've been in government for 25 years, nothing has changed. And the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So what we're saying at the Cape Party is that give the Cape Party a voice. Let's assume the Cape Party got 20% and the DA had 40%. We would go to the DA and say, we will form an alliance with you. Together, we will have a 60% majority. There is no chance of the ANC or any other coalition getting in power. We will give the DA that power on the condition that they meet the requests and the needs of the people of the Cape, and they start to challenge the ANC on the Division of Revenue Act, on these racial policies which discriminate against our value system and our culture, and return power back to the provinces.
Okay. You've mentioned your value system quite a few times, so maybe you want to tell us what that value system is.
Yes, it's a very important part of what the Cape Party stands for, and it implementation would be different to perhaps what a party like the ACDP or the Freedom Front or the Democratic Alliance might propose. We have people of many different faiths within the Cape Party. We believe in the religious freedom and the right for communities to live by a code, a moral code that best serves the interests of that community. Now, for our supporters in Bo-Kaap, they would have a value system that they would want to ensure that the community members live by. Similarly so, in the majority Christian Durbanville, Brackenfell, Mitchell's Plain, we would see Christian values being implemented in those communities. And we would like to give communities the power to stop relying on politicians or governments, be it a president or a mayor, to impose on communities a top-down approach. We believe that with referendums and a political system like the canton system, that communities could then bring about the values, the unique values that best served their interests on the grassroots level.
Okay, so you want the value system to be generated bottom up from people, from communities, and you as government then uphold those value systems.
Yes.
What we're seeing in South Africa now is exactly the opposite. Although there is a majority kind of Christian value system in South Africa, the government doesn't share in that value system, and it's imposing its own value system on the people of South Africa, on the majority. So for example, religious freedoms in South Africa is slowly being eroded because our current government doesn't agree with it. We just see an amendment now to the Civil Union Act to force Christian marriage officers to perform same-sex marriages even though it conflicts with their beliefs and their convictions. Now, there are marriage officers that will do those marriages, but they want everybody to do it, and they want people to actually violate their conscience. Now, that's very important to the people of South Africa, the majority of the people. Would you pass any policy or do anything as the Cape Party to cause people to violate their own conscience?
Absolutely not. And it's shocking because it's not a neutral position. It is an offensive, it's an aggressive position that the ANC and the DA have taken here. What we would do at the Cape Party is be neutral in that if it is against someone's conscience, no one should have greater control over the will of an individual than that individual. So if this is the vocation that this person has chosen, there is no reason, and it's not morally right, that a government should be able to tell that person, I'm sorry, you need to do something that is against your personal value system.
If you, for example, won the province in the election on the 8th of May, what are the policies that you would immediately implement to bring about the change that you talk about?
The very first thing we would hit would be the distribution of our taxes. That's
Okay.
the very first thing we would do, and all things stem from revenue. So once we had influenced a greater percentage allocation of the 200 billion that we pay in here in the Western Cape, once we'd gotten a greater percentage of that back, we would now have resources that we can begin to work with. Now, schooling is another very important pillar of
Yes.
education. And parents are losing touch and losing, the family unit is being destroyed by these communist policies where we get dictated to by a central state what our children are allowed to learn and essentially brainwashed to parrot a political line and a value ideological system that is in line with what the ANC holds true to itself, which is communism. And we would want to remove that dictatorship over education. We would want to see parents taking a greater role in the education of their children. We think that if it is going to be in public schooling, then parents of those communities, and distance is also important. You cannot have people living far away, being bussed into a school many, many kilometers away. We need to have a schooling system which addresses the needs of local communities.
Yes.
Those parents need to have a direct relation, perhaps even a lever of power within that school to ensure that their children are getting the best education that they as families believe they should be getting. And if that is not possible, then we certainly are in favor of the most decentralized form of education, and that would be homeschooling or individual schooling by the children themselves.
Jack, we've got 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to talk about safety and security because it's a key issue here in the Western Cape. High drug addictions. We have some of the biggest gangs in all of the country. How would you deal with that?
It's all economic, and if you don't have a roof over your head, if you don't have a job because you're the wrong skin color, and you are forced into a state of poverty, invariably, if a gang leader comes to you and says, hey, I've got a position for you. You sell these drugs, you take this gun, you do these criminal activities, then you'll be able to look after your 2 daughters and your son. We cannot allow the economic environment, the educational environment, and the housing environment to facilitate the degradation of society, which allows for crime and gangsterism to rise. So I think as soon as we address those issues with a strong police force too, which we would get by having greater revenue to support our police officers here in the Western Cape, with those 4 things, I think we would see crime drastically reduce, if not disappear.
And just quickly, do you think the moral degradation in society has anything to do with what we see in our communities today?
There's no question about it. When communities, again, do not have a roof over your head, if you do not have the financial capacity to feed your children, when you're forced to make morally questionable decisions out of almost a moral necessity to support your best interests or your family's best interests, you're creating this moral dilemma in people where they're almost forced into crime to try and do the right thing in some ironic sense. So yes, you're 100% right. I think crime, which is a result of people's bad moral actions, are a net result of the economic and political environment we find ourselves in. And the DA and the ANC are accountable for this. The Freedom Front and the ACDP have done nothing in 25 years to change it, and which is why we at the Cape Party feel we need to take a very strong stance and fix these problems at the root level here in the Cape.
There you go. So there you have it. That's Jack Miller, the leader of the Cape Party. He's going to be contesting, him and his party is going to be contesting the elections on the 8th of May in the Western Cape Province. We've got his details on the screen, the website address. You can go there if you need more information. And here at Family Policy Institute or Salt and Light, we're going to be giving you more and more information about the various political parties contesting the elections on the 8th of May so that you can make a better decision. Good night and God bless you.